I think the universe of people who feel like Ray are getting smaller and smaller and smaller. We said 6 months ago, you brought it up, you read it somewhere. The anti-Trump crowd take everything this president says literally. Nobody else does. Nobody else takes the president literally when he says things like, or some surrogate of his says something like, we could shoot the such and such. And he's talking about the constitutionality of pardons. I mean, in all honesty, if I were giving Rudy advice, don't answer a hypothetical. I mean, it's just never good to answer a hypothetical. But Rudy's an old curmudgeon. He's been around the block. He likes kind of provoking and starting conversations. But the guy's winning the debate. It's clear to me that the universe of people who, I guess, are in Ray's world, the MSNBC crowd, the CNN crowd, it's getting smaller and smaller and smaller, and it's getting a little more pathetic. I mean, it really is getting a little more pathetic. We turn on MSNBC this morning, and Mika Brzezinski and Joe Scarborough, who are the heroes of that side, and that's right, Joe sold his soul. Now, Joe can run around telling everybody he's a former Republican congressman from northern Florida. Joe sold his soul. Look at his hair and his suits. I mean, that's all you need to do to see that he sold his soul. And I get it. I mean, Joe probably never made a lot of money in his life.
And he is now.
And there's a chance there to be, a kind of a left hero
sure.
or a hero of the left. And Joe took the money. And, hey, good for him. I mean, I'm sure life will be fine with he and Mika. But they begin the show saying, these are typical of tyrants. This sort of behavior is what you see out of a tyrant. That is an overreaction to the nth degree. Do you really believe, as a serious American, do you really believe that somebody of the Trump team contemplating assassinating Jim Comey?
I took it a little bit. You remember Donald Trump's comments during the campaign? I could walk out in the middle
sure.
of Fifth Avenue and shoot somebody and my folks would still be with me. I just kind of took it as a little tongue-in-cheek.
He's playing games with these people, Reb. He and Giuliani are playing games with these people, and they're plenty smart enough to know it, but they're so blinded by their vitriol that they just will not accept some of the realities that are going on today. I got some numbers here. We're talking about that there is no strategy. There is no strategy. What is his strategy? What is he doing today? What did he do yesterday? Well, here's what he's doing. He's breathing energy into the economy, something that the former president didn't do for 8 years. The generic Republican Democrat is now within the margin of error. Now, we were told.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
This is the blue wave.
Sure it is. This is the blue wave we were told by the media was coming. I tweeted Saturday. And I don't have it in front of me verbatim. It'd take me forever, despite the fact that I'm now on Twitter. I'm still not literate enough to find it in an efficient fashion. But I tweeted Saturday that presidents leave legacies in different varieties. When you think of Jefferson, you think of Jeffersonian beliefs and Jeffersonian values. When you think of Lincoln, you think of the Civil War. When you think of FDR, you think of the New Deal. When you think of LBJ, you think of civil rights. When you think of Reagan, you think of the Reagan Revolution, the rebirth of modern conservatism. When you think of, a lot of other presidents, you think a lot of different things. Those are some of the ones that had a dramatic effect on this country. I believe today the legacy of Donald Trump is exposing the liberal bleeding heart media for exactly what they are. There's always been a winking and a nodding and, we know you're left of center, but we believe you try to be fair. And there is Scarborough and Mika Brzezinski start their show this morning, and it's an opinion show. I'll give them a little bit of benefit of the doubt. It's an opinion show. It's not as much a news show. But they're still going down a road, Rev, that there's nothing there. Mika says this is not America. This is very much America. What in America was 1.9% GDP growth. That's not real America. This is very much American. And he's winning. His approvals today are about 45%. The polls of the last 3 or 4 days haven't been about 47 or 48%. He's back. Donald Trump, the most atypical president since Andrew Jackson, is in typical presidency approval rating world. I mean, think of that. He may prove me wrong. I've always believed that Trump is not the sort of American president whose approvals will ever get to 55 or 6, as some have before him. He may prove me wrong. He's at about, I think the RCP average this morning is 44.5. That still includes some polls of about 42 or 3 that were taken a couple of weeks ago. There's kind of a rolling average that they aggregate. He's lapping the field. And the people who are offended by, I mean, I listened this morning coming over, and that's why we got it on MSNB this morning, is because I knew how they would lead the show, saying Trump threatened to kill Jim Comey. Nobody believes that. Nobody believes that Donald Trump is considering Jim Comey. Here we go, MSNBC, Giuliani. Trump could shoot Comey and not be indicted. Could he? Of course he couldn't. And they're talking about this reeks of, the former Soviet Union and Vladimir Putin and Stalin. And I mean, that's ridiculous. And all you're doing is you're feeding a heavy dose of Kool-Aid to a ever-shrinking universe of people. Look at the approval ratings. Look at the signs in the economy. And these few million people in America who still can't come to the accepting of Donald Trump got duly elected president of the United States of America, you still can't get over it. You still can't accept it. And you're making idiots of yourself when you begin a newscast by saying, this is not America. These are the signs of a tyrant. Nobody in Trump world believes that. We kind of chuckled a little bit when Giuliani said that. The overwhelming majority of normal and average Americans kind of chuckled when Giuliani said that. Once again, if I were giving political advice to a surrogate, one prerequisite would be don't answer a hypothetical. But Rudy's been around the block forever, and he's kind of toying with people. And he says these things well aware of the response they'll generate, and he believes, and the Trump team has made a calculus, that the number of people who are, quote-unquote, deeply offended by remarks like that are getting smaller and smaller and smaller. You took the bait, media. When Donald Trump uttered fake news the first time, you couldn't help yourself. You engaged in a fight. Instead of saying, that's the president, he's entitled to his opinion, we'll keep reporting the facts the best way we know how, you showed who you really are. I used a comparison or an analogy Friday of radio silence. Remember John J. Rambo in the woods? And they were calling John Rambo, and the colonel said he's not going to break radio silence. He's not going to do that. He's been trained to not do that. You're not going to get him to engage. Well, the media, I guess, to some degree, gave in to not practicing radio silence. They took the bait. And never in American history have so few people trusted the people who report the political news to the citizenry of this country. He's killing them. If he hadn't already killed them, Reb, he's killing them. And when you look at the scandals of this president every day, NBC, CBS, ABC, name your source. And we're told that we've got a tyrant in the White House, the most scandalous White House in the history of mankind, someone who threatened to shoot Jim Comey. If the American people are rational people by and large, then explain to me why his approvals are going up and why the generic Republican, generic Democrat are now within the margin of error. The only conclusion you can draw, with all due respect to Ray, is he's becoming fewer and fewer and fewer and fewer. All these things we were told were going to happen by the Paul Krugmans of the world, the Jeff Bezos of the world, the George Wills of the world, the Bushes of the world, the Obamas of the world, the people that we trusted to orchestrate the enormity of the universe. All these people who told us that if we did this, we were going off into the abyss. And none of this has happened. In fact, quite the contrary. The economy is as good as it's been in about 20 or 25, maybe 30 years. I'm not hanging my hat on unemployment because I still think that is a misrepresentation of employment. I still believe the workforce participation rate is what you need to pay close attention to. But the economy is far better now than it was when Barack Obama, the Atlanta Fed, this morning released a Friday, being reported on this morning, Bloomberg.com believes now the economy could grow at north of 4% in the second half of 2018. We averaged about 1.9% or 1.8% in the 8 years that Barack Obama was president. So in year 1.5, the first 500 days, I mean, that's kind of where we are. The first 500 days of the Trump presidency, he has obliterated the legacy of his predecessor. There is very little to remind us now of Barack Obama. Built big library in Chicago. Good for them. They're haggling over land right now.
I was going to say maybe they will.
Well, I mean, maybe they will. But we hear these stories, and they're falling on deaf ears. And most people have moved on from Russia and collusion. Most people have moved on from obstruction of justice. Most people have moved on and accepted the fact, hey, this guy got elected and it appears to me doing a pretty good job. And Giuliani, I think, just toys around with the media. You don't say things like that if you believe you got big trouble. I mean, you don't say things like that if you believe there's an indictment coming, or if indeed there is a reason to be concerned about collusion or obstruction of justice. You don't say things like that. You say things like that when you're pretty liberated, when you believe you're free and clear of any potential charge. And the universe of people who believe Trump colluded with Russia is getting smaller and smaller. They oversold the narrative. They told you on day one the reason he's president is the Russians colluded with the people in Ohio, Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, and 80 or 90 or 100,000 people were hoodwinked by Vladimir Putin and his Soviet stooges. No. Nobody ever believed that, except you. Nobody ever drank that Kool-Aid, except you. And your universe is getting smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller, and it's a little bit like someone drowning. You start grasping for everything imaginable. And when Giuliani says something very much tongue-in-cheek, I mean, do you really believe that the president ever considered shooting Jim Comey? But MSNBC, instead of saying, that's a crazy thing for the president to say, they say we're living the age of a tyrant. And the number of people they're telling that to who are believing any of that is getting smaller and smaller and smaller. And Rev, you can hear the frustration. You sense the anxiety of the other side. He won. And he's doing a damn good job running the country in the most unconventional way imaginable. Name something today that is worse off than it was when he got there. The debt. The debt. Shame on the Republicans for not dealing with the debt. Shame on Republicans for running on the campaign promises of fiscal restraint and financial responsibility and getting to Washington and doing no different than anybody else. No, not shame on Donald Trump. How many times did Donald Trump say, we're going to control the deficit? We're going to slow down spending. I don't remember Trump saying that. In fact, Thigpen has said that's the frustrating part of the Trump presidency. He never said, I'll address the debt in any way, shape, or form. But name something that is in not as good a shape or better shape today than it was when Trump got there. Consumer confidence is up. Consumer spending is up. Retail sales are up. Salaries amongst the middle class are up. Unemployment is down. You got to give the guy credit. You don't have to like him. I get the fact that there are a number of people who don't like him, but you got to give the guy credit. Up to now, he's been a pretty John Brown good president. Take a break. Back in a minute. Good morning, PD Live 95. Thanks to our good friends at Blue Line Shooting Center.